Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. You know, when Joe Biden was running for president, his fundamental promise was to defeat the virus, get the country up and running again, and just be the polar opposite of Donald Trump by, laying low, trying to unify the country around big goals. At the time, Trump thought this was risible. He mocked Biden, calling him, quote, the most boring human being I've ever seen. Well, we are now more than 100 days into the Biden presidency, and so far, President Biden is basically ticking through every box, delivering on all the big promises. And there is new polling showing that maybe boring is exactly what a lot of people wanted. I mean, I've said this before, and I want to stress it again. Biden's approach to the presidency so far is completely different in terms of approaching its rhetorical centrality than certainly his predecessor, but even Barack Obama or Bill Clinton. Thanks to the Biden administration's accelerated vaccination push, new cases of COVID are at the lowest point since the beginning of October. Hallelujah. We have not had a fourth wave, just that relatively muted bump at the end of the chart there. Hopefully, as more and more people get vaccinated, that case number will get lower and lower and lower. It's not a stretch to say the Biden administration has done as good a job at rolling out vaccines and vaccination as any other large developed nation in the world. In addition, Biden's stimulus package has provided the sparky promise. Look at some of these numbers. U.S. gross domestic product, GDP, hit 6.4%. That's the second best quarterly reading since 2003, trailing only last summer's super anomalous record rebound, right after we shut down the economy and then started to open it back up in the summer. But last year's number is a crazy outlier. It was in an unprecedented set of circumstances. Aside from that, the last time the U.S. GDP hit 6.4% in the first quarter of the year was 1969. And again, it's not just some large abstract economic measurements because people don't care about that. They generally care what the economy is doing in their lives. We care about our own finances. Thanks to the stimulus, Americans actually have more money to spend, a lot more. Look at this statistic. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, okay, disposable personal income, that's the money that Americans have to spend, right? The amount of money an individual household has after taxes increased $2.36 trillion, 67% in the first quarter of 2021. Compare that with a decrease of $402 billion. That's down 8.8% in the last quarter of 2020. Look at the end of that chart. See how it goes down there and then rockets up? Some restaurant owners, other service employers have complained that, they can't hire people. People don't want to work because the stimulus benefits are so good, even though a study last summer found extra unemployment benefits are not creating a disincentive for job seekers. But again, think about this. If your big critique is job markets are too tight and you have to pay people too much money in their jobs, most folks are going to take that, right? In fact, a new Yahoo News YouGov poll found people like just about everything Biden's doing, at least a majority do. Americans approve his handling of the coronavirus by a big margin, 57-32. They approve his handling of the economy, 49-38. Biden's also above water on things that tend to be more polarizing and controversial, on climate change, race, foreign policy, all major stories during the first few months of his presidency. And yet, as sure-footed as unified Democratic control has been in pursuing these big popular things, and they are 100 days in, they've been doing a pretty good job. The Republican Party is still there. It is more radicalized against democracy than ever. That gets worse every day. We're going to talk about that more. It's committed to using the tools at its disposal to lock itself into power, no matter what the voters think. And the institutions of American governance, from state gerrymandering to the United States Senate, already give the Republican Party incredible power to do that. So unless President Biden and Democrats start to attempt the more politically dangerous but necessary structural reforms, killing the filibuster, passing H.R. 1 and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, D.C. statehood, unless they start getting more support from all the Senate Democrats, including West Virginia's Joe Manchin, who this weekend says he opposes D.C. statehood, everything Biden and the Democratic Party have done, more or less right, which, again, they have. This is not some, fanboy thing. It's just an evaluation of where they are in the first 100 days. They have been delivering on the things they said they would do. All of that is still going to be imperiled by the structural conditions of minority rule in U.S. governing institutions and a party that is radicalizing against democracy married to each other. And the clock on the Biden administration is ticking. Yes, Democrats control the House and Senate, but for how long? Look at how the party in the White House has traditionally fared in the first midterms under a new president. It's not pretty. The only one to gain seats, George W. Bush, and that was shortly after 9/11. A part of that is just the thermostatic nature of public opinion, right? Republicans are in power, people kind of turn against them. Democrats are in power, people turn against them. So you try to do the best you can. But the deeper structural issues, the way that Republican use gerrymandering in the states and has been utilized in the right, the increasing disconnect between the U.S. Senate, the median voter in a Senate race, and the U.S. populace, you have to address those. The president deserves praise for everything he's accomplished to this point. But in some ways, it's like, now comes the hard part, right? This gets to the core of the fundamental story of our time, which continues to be, will American democracy be refortified against its enemies or not?
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.